The first settlement that would later become the village of Tularosa in the New Mexico Territory was first attempted in 1860, but was unsuccessful. Tularosa, Spanish for the rose-colored reeds that grew along the banks of the Rio Tularosa, became a settlement 3 years later in 1863. Soon after, significant buildings began to appear in the settlement, including the St. Francis de Paula Church, a large adobe church built in 1865, the acequia system, or ditch irrigation system, and a red brick schoolhouse. As a settlement, Tularosa flourished. Hispanic farmers moved into the area. New Mexico became the 47th state in 1912, and by 1916, the settlement was lawfully incorporated and became the village of Tularosa. Today, most of the historical buildings still stand. Built in early 1917 by Robert E. McKee and designed by architect Henry Charles Trost, the Tularosa red brick schoolhouse was constructed at the top of Granado Street, near where Main Street and the commercial district come together. In 1916, Tularosa leaders issued a bond which allowed the large 3-story brick schoolhouse to be built at a cost of $30,000 and hired architect Henry Trost to design it. Henry Trost was born on March 5th in 1860. Trost attended art school and worked as an architectural draftsman in Ohio until 1880. After school, he headed west and for the next 8 years worked in Denver, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, Fort Worth, Galveston, New Orleans, and Dodge City, and was greatly influenced by the work of Lewis H. Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright. In 1903, Trost moved to El Paso, and over the coming years, he designed at least 300 buildings in the area, as well as hundreds more throughout Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The Tularosa red brick schoolhouse plans were completed by Trost in 1916. The design and plans for the building were completed around a century ago. The red brick schoolhouse will officially celebrate its 100th birthday next year. Tularosa's 3-story brick school began providing instruction to local students in the fall of 1917, offering classes from kindergarten through 12th grade. Citizens of Tularosa took great pride in the rectangular 3-story brick building with its raised stone foundation. When the school was completed in 1917, its purpose was to provide the residents of Tularosa a state-of-the-art facility for their children's education. According to the Red Brick Building Restoration Foundation, the building was a milestone in the economic, cultural, and educational development in the early days of Tularosa. The number of students enrolled grew each year, and the schoolhouse was nearly beyond capacity, with several hundred area students attending in the 1970s. The construction of new schools in the village soon met the demands of the increasing class sizes, and the Red Brick Schoolhouse saw its last years as an educational institution in 1979. Among several notable graduates from the Tularosa School was Jan Clayton, a well-known Hollywood actress who earned her diploma there in 1935 and went on to study music and drama at Gulf Park College for Women in Mississippi. Miss Clayton is probably best known for her role of Tommy Rettig's mother in the original Lassie television series. She was nominated for an Oscar in the movie The Snake Pit, nominated for a Tony Award for Carousel, and won an Emmy for her work in the Lassie series. Despite her fame, Jan Clayton called Tularosa her home. She passed away August 28, 1983, in her West Hollywood home at the age of 66. Her headstone rests in the Fairview Cemetery in Tularosa. Catherine Davalos Ortega was born on July 16, 1934, in Tularosa. One of 9 children, Miss Ortega spent her first years speaking only Spanish, and later attended elementary classes at the Red Brick Schoolhouse where she learned English. In 1968, Ortega moved to Los Angeles where she eventually became president of Santa Ana State Bank. In 1983, Catherine Davalos Ortega accepted the nomination for the U.S. Treasury and became the 38th Treasurer of the United States under President Ronald Reagan and later George H.W. Bush. Perhaps Jan Clayton and Catherine Davalos Ortega have the Red Brick Schoolhouse to thank for their very distinguished careers. Just because the Red Brick Schoolhouse no longer offered formal classes, that did not mean it couldn't be used for other purposes. During the 1980s, the building housed the offices of the Tularosa School Board and school administration offices, and the lower level served as a classroom and lab for culinary arts students. Eventually, however, maintenance on the aging building fell behind, and soon the majestic 22,000 square foot structure fell into disrepair. Since the late 1980s, Tularosa's red brick schoolhouse has been used for storage. As the building sat forgotten, the roof began to deteriorate. Water coming into the building damaged the sturdy wooden floors in the 90-year-old classrooms. Window frames on the east side were braced to prevent further damage, and pigeons took up residence inside the building. Community members formed the Red Brick Building Restoration Foundation in the hopes of saving the structure. In 2007, enough funding had been collected to construct an entire new roof over the building. While a great deal of repair is still needed on the inside, the new roof is protecting the school from further weather damage and is keeping out the birds. As the building approaches its 100th birthday, the past century of use is still apparent. Classroom chalkboards still line the walls, old file cabinets stand in darkened corners, and the hand-painted murals created by students from the past still reflect the early days of New Mexico. The Red Brick Building Restoration Foundation welcomes donations that will help save the historic building. The organization hopes that continued appeals to the state and perhaps to the federal government might secure grants or funding to facilitate restoring the school. The Red Brick Schoolhouse remains a silent sentry at the top of Granado Street in the village of Tularosa. It is listed in the National Register of Historic Places.